Well, hello on this wonderful sunny day. Today's the 1st of September 2017 and it's a lovely sunny day, and we haven't had many of those this summer. Probably the worst summer I can remember in Scotland in my life. Luckily I was in Spain the other week, so it sort of rescued the summer. So anyway, I thought today I would deal with, as you know, I'm trying to go through the confusing stories, especially in the Old Testament, in relation to things that happened, which when obviously you're a Bible student or somebody who believes in the Bible, that you probably glossed over, probably just you never really thought about it, never really thought about the implications of what was actually being discussed, where you wouldn't want to find fault with any of the Bible characters, or you'd want to think all their motives were pure and good, and especially you'd have to look at it and see in respect to if God had intervened in things, and see if the loving way he may have dealt with certain aspects of the Bible stories or the characters. And obviously what's happened is subsequently once I've done what I've done, I'm now look at the stories in the Bible in a completely different light, which has allowed me to come to my own conclusions about what it really teaches us, what these Bible stories really teach us about the God of the Bible and of the Bible characters. Now, today I'm going to discuss, and how long it's going to take me. It's not a long story. It's not a long story, so we shouldn't be here that long. And yet again, of course, I don't have a Bible, so I'm reading this out because as you know, I got rid of everything relating to my former religion when I moved down to where I live now. All went in a box and all went to a tip. I could have put it in a charity shop, but I don't think anybody wanted to read the Divine Plan of the Ages or the Revelation book, whatever I had at the time. So everything went, including my Bible. So I've only, I'd literally turned my back on everything. But so now I'm going back to this, because obviously a lot of things in your mind, as you're probably aware, that when you're Jehovah's Witness, and only, again, as I said many times later, that many years later, all of a sudden things come back, and you thought, oh, why? What about that story? That didn't make any sense, did it? So this is one of the stories that I do remember reading at the time. As you know, I don't think it obviously came up in the Kingdom Hall during the. I don't think we do that anymore. I don't know. It's a different religion to me anyway. Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like it's as different as Catholics and Protestants are. It's a completely different religion. So obviously we must have discussed this during the Bible reading, and your own personal Bible reading. And so obviously this must have been brought up at the Kingdom Hall, but I don't think a lot of fuss was made of it. In one of the cases, somebody tried to prove that God didn't like masturbation during one of the things that happens here, but that's not quite the case at what happens here. So anyway, I'll crack on. This is the story of Judah and Tamar. Now, the reason why this is an important story is because it's through Tamar that Jesus Christ descends from. Yes, Jesus Christ descends through Tamar. So there you go. The ransom sacrifice, the Messiah, the Son of God comes through this line, through Tamar. So what happens in this story is it's quite important. It's quite important. In other words, no Tamar, maybe no Jesus. God knows. Or maybe doesn't. Anyway, we'll just crack on with this story. So, if just to reflect here, to set the scene, Judah, of course, is one of the sons of Jacob. Remember Jacob, and he had a lot of sons, and Egypt, and you know that you know the story. You're putting this. It's one of the sons. So anyway, let's crack on here. So it's before the time of Moses, if that helps. So anyway, at the time, Judah left his brothers, because we know he had one or two of them, where obviously you get the tribes of Israel, come from all his brothers, and Judah's one of the main branches. And it's at the time Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hirah. Okay? I don't know why he left, but obviously he's off. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. So straight away he meets the daughter of a Canaanite man. And we know that there was a lot of enmity later on. Obviously, the Canaanites didn't believe the same thing as, sort of different religion to, or beliefs to Judah and his brothers and Jacob, and obviously had different gods. So obviously, they never had this God of Yahweh, Jehovah, or whatever you want to call him. So anyway, so he marries her and made love to her, as you normally do. Normally, it goes and he marries, made love. Well done. He really broke the mold on that one. So anyway, she became pregnant. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? You make love to a woman and you get pregnant. Well, there you go. So she gave birth to a son. Hurrah! That obviously would have kept him very happy. And his name was E-R, And she conceived again. Christ, he must have made love once again. She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. And they obviously make love again, because she gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. Not as in Australian G'day Sheila, but Shelah, S-H-E-L-A-H, Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Who really cares? But anyway, there you go. It's been a bit specific. 3 sons, and we also know where one of them was actually born for the reference. So, anyway, we don't know what happened here, but Judah got a wife for I don't know how he got him. What did he do? eBay or Amazon. So Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Enter Tamar into the story. But it says, but Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Right. No explanation whatsoever at all. Just that apparently Judah's firstborn, obviously erred in the face of the Lord or God, and so the Lord put him to death, as you do. Now this is the God, of course, the God of love, the God who's slow to anger and quick to mercy. Allegedly, obviously, yet again we have this massive contrast between what we read about the Son of God in the New Testament and what we read about God in the Old Testament, especially in the first 5 books. It is chalk and cheese. It's a bit like sometimes you may, you look at Jesus' life and you think, well, pretty good egg, didn't do anything bad, blah, 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 looks like he was a pretty decent chap. But then when you see what his father did before that, you think, wow, it's chalk and cheese. But you do get that in real life. You do sometimes get fathers who are, like, you don't want to meet my dad. Or I'd go and speak to the son because you speak to the son, because you do get that way. You get some fathers who are complete, ogres, complete twat, and the sons are a completely different kettle of fish, because they've probably seen what the dad's like dealing with people and thought, I'm not going to be like him. So maybe Jesus was the same. Maybe Jesus had seen all what God had been up to during his reign, and thought, one thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to repeat my father's mistakes. Just thinking out the box here. So anyway, unfortunately, poor has been killed. He's been killed, and it's a bit odd because obviously it's odd that that Judah marries Shua and makes love to her and she becomes pregnant, but obviously marries Tamar. They must have made love, and she doesn't get pregnant. Oh, what are the chances? What are the chances? So, how long were they married for? How come did she never got pregnant? What was going on here? We don't really know. But anyway, the Lord, the God of love, the guy who's slow to anger, decides to just kill him, just like that, just as you do. So then Judah said to Onan, so in other words, Judah's got, you have to start off with 3 sons, and now we're down to 2. So then Judah said to Onan, and Onan is the second brother, says to Onan, sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother. Now this is a bit odd, because where was that commandment? Where was that commandment? Where was this duty? At what point was Onan contracted or obliged to have to sleep with his dead brother's wife? There was no Mosaic law there. There's nothing there. So why should he have to do this? Why should he have to sleep with his dead brother's wife? because it says here to raise up offspring for your brother. You know, think about it. Think about it. You know, if you've got a brother or whatever, and he you know, whatever happens, and he dies, and there's his wife. You know, do you have to then say, oh well, sorry, I've got to, you know, you may be in love with another woman, but unfortunately Dad says, oh sorry, you've got to make your sister-in-law pregnant. You've got to make your sister-in-law pregnant, because that's what you do. You know, that's your duty. That's your duty. It's bizarrely, you know, where did this come from? Where did this come from? Maybe it was quite popular back then. I don't really know. But there wasn't a commandment. So in other words, if Onan decided to say, look, Dad, I'm in love with somebody else, or Tamar repulses me. I don't know what ever saw in her. In fact, I don't know what you saw in her to bring her to marry him anyway. Because she's not the best looking, is she? I don't know. Or maybe Onan was secretly gay. I don't really know. There's so many permutations here, you know, of what the real truth was. We don't really know. But anyway, this is it. You know, no Mosaic law, and basically that the father's putting the onus on his second son and say, you've got to now make her pregnant, right? So, bizarrely, it says here, it's your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother. But it wouldn't be, what's happening here? It wouldn't be his brother's offspring. It'd be his offspring. So that's why it says, but Onan knew that the child would not be his. So, hold on a second, I'm trying to confuse here. Er's died. Er's been put to death, and Tamar's not pregnant. So what's supposed to happen here? Is it somehow here that somehow Onan's got to secretly get her pregnant, and then for Judah to say, oh well, she's expecting now, and that's actually the son of my dead firstborn, who got lovingly put to death by Jehovah. It's a bit odd, and Onan, this must be the case, because Onan says, but Onan knew that the child would not be his. So it must have been a case that somehow this is what he was to do, is basically, it's your duty, you've got to get her pregnant, but it's, don't say to anybody, we're going to make out it's not yours. So of course, I don't think his heart was in it. I don't think his heart was in it completely, because he wasn't obviously, it wasn't a case of, oh well, now you're going to have to marry Tamar. There's nothing. It was just a case, you know, just slip her a quick one, get her pregnant, and maybe this was quite quickly after the loving death of and maybe they wanted to make out that it was the firstborn son. We don't really know, but looking at this, that's the only thing I can surmise from this, unless anybody can tell me different. So this is, which leads to his downfall. So Onan realizes that the child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, which obviously was more than once or twice, he hasn't been told, by the way, you need to marry her, which is a bit odd, because normally, you know, Judah married Shua, he married her and made love. Marries Tamar, makes love, well, might have, but all of a sudden we get to Onan and he doesn't marry Tamar. It's really odd. So it says here, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. So here's this thing: he didn't want to get her pregnant. He was still, you know, having to have sex with her, and he was still under this not illusion, but obviously under the understanding that this offspring would not be known as his son. Maybe you should have waited maybe 10 months later and say, well, it clearly isn't my dead brother's son, because it doesn't work out. So what he was doing here, he was practicing a method of contraception called the withdrawal method. So literally just before he was about to ejaculate, or just before he was about to come, he whips out his willy, and then he comes on the side. He may have come on a tits, I don't know. He may have just come on a tummy or down the leg, or maybe in a face. I don't know. It's you know, what did he do here? Because obviously he did it several times, and just before he's about to come, he whips it out and managed to spill his semen on the ground. Like, flies it here, flies it there, a bit in the face, a little bit on the tits, a bit on the tummy, and maybe a little dribble on the leg. You know, maybe a bit in the hair, a bit up her nose, a bit dribble down the leg. I don't know. That there's so many ways this could eventually spilled on the ground, but this is what happened. This is what happened. The withdrawal method, bang bang, and that was that. But and this is a problem here. This comes to the next bit. So in other words, because Onan didn't want to make Tamar pregnant on the understanding it wouldn't be his son, it'd be viewed as his dead brother's son, and there was no, you know, there's no law here to say what he's doing is wrong, and it's your duty according to his father. Because he started firing his load on the ground or on Tamar's face. No, you get the idea. We've gone down that one. Because he was firing his load there, God was looking at this. Now this is the same God, let's just examine here, that during the Garden of Eden, when Eve was getting tempted by the snake, that God was not doing anything, and which led to the downfall of man, and eventually for God to eventually have to make arrangement for his own son to be put to death, and also the times that when all the angels were going down to the flood, pre-flood, causing chaos, raising up offspring, during the time that when God was in heaven and he was saying to Satan, "Satan, where have you been? What have you been up to do? What have you been doing? Oh, I've been wandering the earth, and have you seen my man Job there?" You know, this is God. This is the guy who seems to not really notice a lot that's going on the earth. Not really. He doesn't. He's not like he's not on the. You know, I don't know. He's just not there. He's just not on the boil. He's just, he's in heaven doing heavenly things, whatever God does. But apparently, why wasn't God so switched on in the Garden of Eden, and then we wouldn't all be dying, obviously? Why wasn't he so switched on then, but when it came to looking at Onan making love to Tamar, all of a sudden he was noticed, oh my God, he's come on a face again. It's bizarre. He obviously was watching this, watching every single movement. What about all the other brothers? What about all the things that's happening to all the other brothers? No. He's not watching what's happened with all the other brothers. Instead, he's concentrating on this one thing, or whether Onan is coming inside his dead brother's wife Tamar, and he's noticed that he's whipping it out and coming on a face. We get the. And so unfortunately, because Onan did this, the loving, slow to anger God that Jehovah God, the God of the Bible is, brothers and sisters, what does he do to Onan? He puts him to death. He could have been a good man, a great man, a righteous man. He could have been kind to people who were poor. He might have been upstanding, uprighteous, always tried to, do best to everybody. He could have been a really good chap. But unfortunately, he decided to ejaculate on top of Tamar instead of in Tamar, and according to God, it was a wicked thing in his eyes. There was no law that he was supposed to follow here, just his duty, and he realised that the offspring would be brought up as his dead brothers, not his own. So he didn't feel it was right. But there you go. God, this is the same God. It's the God of the Bible. It's the same God that all you guys who still believe in God still pray to. You've got to say to yourself, where's the justice in that? Where is the righteous justice? It wasn't Judah who put to death his own son. It wasn't Judah. It was God. God put him to death. He'd already put one brother to death because he was really wicked, and now he's put this other brother. You think Onan might have been thinking, oh my God, God's already put to death my brother. I'm going to be really good now, but I just can't. But anyway, this is your God, ladies and gentlemen. This is your God, brothers and sisters. This is the loving God Jehovah. This is him. This is your God. This is your God who will put a man to death purely because he ejaculated on his dead wife's tummy, tits, face, or wherever it was. It's ridiculous, but this is your God. So anyway, let's crack on with this one. So, Judah has now lost 2 sons. He's only got one left. He's only got one left. And this guy's called Sheila. G'day, Sheila. This guy's called Sheila, right? So he's only got one son left, Sheila. So he's imagining at this point, God, the loving God, the one he's, all this family serves, this loving God, this really, really great chap, thinking, well, he's already put to death 2 of my sons, and the last reason for putting death was really, really insignificant and very silly. So what he thought was, the only way to protect his son, which this makes sense, if you're a father, this makes sense. He says to Tamar, to his daughter-in-law Tamar, he goes, live as a widow in your father's household until my son Sheila grows up. So he says to her, I think you should go and live with your dad now. I know you've been living with us for a bit. 2 of my sons have died. One of them directly because of what was happening with you and him. The other one, maybe 2. Who knows? So he says to her, go and live with your dad. Go and live with your dad. It says, for he thought he may die too. No, not him, but his other son. So he's thinking to himself, look, I've only got one son left. Can you go and live with your dad? And when my son Sheila grows up, then we'll maybe thinking about what's happened. It's bizarre. Why would he have to do this? Why was he obliged to then make sure that his 3rd son would then have to lay down with this woman again? Because obviously at that point there'd be no kidding whose offspring it was. It clearly wouldn't be hers because he's been dead years. So I don't know what the obligation is. I don't know why he had to do this. And what about Sheila? Maybe he had found somebody else more appropriate. Maybe again he wouldn't fancy Tamar. Maybe Tamar was 10 years older. Maybe he'd fall in love with somebody else. It's just nonsense. So anyway, we'll crack on. So after a long time, so anyway, Tamar's away. So Tamar's back living with her dad. I don't know what she's doing, but she's obviously dressed in, sackcloth and ashes, or she's head to toe in black. So after a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. The daughter of Shua? I'm confused here. Oh right, sorry, I've totally got this wrong. There, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite maid, Shua. All right, so sorry, I've read this wrong. So in other words, we don't know. He didn't marry Shua. Shua was the father of Judah's wife. But yet again, the Bible doesn't tell her her name. Let me just read this. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married and made love to her. She became pregnant. She name of the son, name of the other son, name of that son. There is no mention of Judah's wife. So there you go. We know the name of Judah's wife's dad, but we don't know the name of Judah's wife. We know the name of the children and Tamar, but we don't know. And honestly, if you're a woman and you're reading this, think about this. Misogyny rules in the Bible, and it still carries on into the witnesses today. Really, women are so little. We don't even know the wife of Lot. It just goes on. Do we know the wife of Job as well? Probably don't either. Yeah, key characters, but we can't be bothered to even name them because they're just a woman after all. So anyway, let's crack on. So after a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua. Why don't you just put Judah's wife, I don't know, Ethel? After a long time, Judah's wife Ethel died. But no, we can't name Judah's wife. We'll just call her the daughter of Shua. Maybe she didn't have a name. Maybe she was just known as woman. So died. So when Judah had recovered from his grief from the death of the wife, he never got to know her name, right? He went up to Timnah, to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, the Adulamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, oh, by the way, your father-in-law is on the way to Timnah to shear his sheep, a cunning plan developed in her head. She's probably still at this time, obviously she's still a widow. Maybe she's now, nobody's gonna take her up. She's probably thinking nobody else is gonna marry me now. I'm desperate, I'm broody as anything. I want to have a child. And the only person who's gonna make me pregnant is gonna be Judah, because obviously he's kept Sheila from spending time with her, because he's probably thought, I don't want to lose another son. So a cunning plan develops in her mind. So she takes off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, so she's got a veil on her face, and then sat down at the entrance to Onan, which is on the road to Timnah. So in other words, she knows he's on the way to Timnah, so she sits down at the entrance to this place called Onan, which apparently I haven't really looked it up because I'm not interested, but it's obviously a place which is supposed to have a shrine there. So there's a shrine there. So shrine to who? We don't know. Obviously probably maybe to a foreign god, maybe. So he's on the way there, so she goes down there, puts a veil over her face because she has a cunning plan. So she disguised herself, sits down the entrance, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Sheila had grown up, that's the youngest and third son, she had not been given to him as his wife. Well, there it says wife there. So there she was surely expecting, to become his wife, but didn't happen, because obviously Judah wanted to make sure that his third son didn't die at the hands of a loving, merciful God. So when Judah saw her, as you do, he thought she was a prostitute. Obviously she had a veil on her, she was sitting there, and obviously thought she's a prostitute at this shrine. So of course, because Judah being an upstanding man, one that he knew basic common decency, he knew what was right and what was wrong, because he obviously, when his son died, he said to his other son, it's your duty to do this. So there must be some sort of moral code, moral fibre at the time that he must have had. Obviously he saw this prostitute and walked straight past her, because obviously it must have been known at that time that to go and have sex with a prostitute was wrong. And so of course he walked right past her because it was very, very wrong. And obviously he didn't want to be put to death by the God of mercy, because he realised that his own son had been found wicked and was put to death, and his other son had been put to death just because he ejaculated on top of Tamar, not inside her. So clearly he was going to completely avoid this woman he thought was a prostitute, because he didn't want the God of mercy to kill him on the spot. No, that didn't happen at all, did it? No, 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 no. Quite the opposite happened. Quite the opposite happened here. So let's go on with this story. So he saw Tamar and thought she was a prostitute because she'd covered her face, didn't recognise her Tamar at all, and not realising that was, oh my God, this is my daughter-in-law here. What are you doing, pretending to be a prostitute? He went over to the roadside and says, come now, let me sleep with you. Well, there you go. There you go. So he did this with no thought that the loving God, the merciful God, would put him to death on the spot. He just says, come on, let me sleep with you. And of course, she being a prostitute, there had to be some sort of transfer of money or funds or something. You don't just have willy-nilly sex with anybody, especially an older man like Judah was at the time. So she says to him, and what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. And of course he's thinking, I haven't really got anything. A cunning thought. I'll send you a young goat from my flock. Job's a good one. And she goes, you haven't got your flock here. She's not stupid. She's not stupid. She realises this could just be another one of those non-paying customers that many prostitutes do get. So she goes, well, will you give me something as a pledge until you send the young goat? She asks. And he says, what pledge should I give you? So she looks at him up and down, obviously, and thinks, right, what can I keep of his that I can keep quite small, quite handy, which will be used later on. So she says, your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand. Flipping heck, she didn't want much. If you think about it, if you're going down the road, though, says, what else did he have on his belongings? He obviously had what he was wearing, his cord and his seal and his staff. Flipping heck, he was doing like robbery. She was nicking off of his belongings. So anyway, so it says, your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand, she answered. So he gave them to her. He says, there's my staff. And he sat with her. So he gave her. So basically, he gave her his big staff, and then he gave her his little staff, his big staff and his little staff. So he gave her 2 staffs. One staff was to keep, and one staff was to do other things with. So he gave her 2 staffs. And bizarrely, isn't this interesting? So obviously she was making love with her all this time as his wife, and she never got pregnant. But my God, Judah, even in his advanced age, my God, his sperm was he had some dogged sperm in that staff of his, because bizarrely she became pregnant. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that she was ovulating at exactly the same time that he was taking this journey, and that when he made love to her that time, that he got her pregnant? What are the chances? You know, it's a loving provision from Jehovah. What are the chances of this? So of course, she got pregnant. And after she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. So let me think about it. Can we just think of the act itself here? She's wearing a veil, and at no point does he lift off the veil and says, obviously notices it's Tamar. So obviously, what do we get from that? So we're clearly Judah wasn't a kisser. He wasn't a kisser. He never, caressed. He wasn't good at the kissing, because he clearly never kissed her once. Literally, it must have been just a case that he must have just lifted off the back of a thing, and right from behind. It must have been, because if she was on top of him, I'm sure he must have just seen. Hold on a second. That veil must have been bouncing around a bit, and even if she was lying on the floor, I'm sure he must have been just curious to lift that veil. So clearly she must have had her back to him, her face to him, and clearly the act must have happened from behind. The staffing happened from behind. So what a lover. What a love-making machine. What a tender lover Judah was. Never even saw her face, never kissed her, just pumped her from behind, and he was off. So of course, he buggers off, but maybe he buggered her as well, I don't know. So he buggers off. He goes off, and she takes off her prostitute clothes, a veil, and goes back to looking like a widow again. So meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Dulamite in order to get his pledge back from the Romans. Obviously he staffed her, but he wants his big staff back, and he wants his cord and his whatever the other thing was, his cord and his staff and his seal. But of course, the guy goes and can't find her, because she wasn't a prostitute, and she wasn't by this shrine day in day out, accepting staffs from every Tom, Dick, and Judah. So anyway, he asked the men who lived by where the shrine was. He says, "Where's the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enium?" And of course, the bloke goes, "What are you on about?" He says, there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here, they said. So of course he's thinking, well, dearie me. So he went back to Judah and said, sorry mate, I haven't got your staff, I haven't got your cord, and I haven't got your seal, because they say there isn't a shrine prostitute. And why are you telling me to go and pay her? Because now I know that you shagged a prostitute, and maybe I'll just put you to death instead. So anyway, not a big secret here, not a real big secret that Judah slept with the prostitute. Not a big secret there, bizarrely, it's bizarre. So anyway, he didn't keep that one to himself. So anyway, so Judah then said, let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughing stock. So that's it. Let her keep what we had, otherwise we'll become a laughing stock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her. So he's probably thinking, oh, how embarrassing that was. Oh, what do you thought? There's plenty of staffs where that came from. So anyway, Obviously, about 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, because obviously it was clear that that she was pregnant, and guilty of prostitution. Hold on a second. She'd had. I'm confused by this bit. And as a result, she's now pregnant. So in other words, no, all she'd had was sex outside marriage, but she'd already done that when she was with the guy who wouldn't ejaculate inside her, because she was not married to him according to this story. So was she guilty of prostitution then? She was having sex with somebody who wasn't her husband, because according to let me just read this again. Blah 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 blah. It says, then Judah said to Onan, sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty as a brother-in-law. So it doesn't, normally, as we do get the mention of the marriages of Judah to the nameless woman and the marriage of to Tamar, when it comes to Onan, it doesn't say they got married. So surely she was guilty of prostitution then. If she'd become pregnant to Onan, if Onan had actually ejaculated inside her instead of on top of her tits, that sort of business, would she be guilty of prostitution then? I don't really know. But anyway, she's been found guilty of prostitution, not because she was sitting at the shrine every day and everyone goes, there she is. It's because obviously she clearly made love to somebody and was pregnant. So of course, Judah, being a righteous man, even though he'd already slept with the prostitute himself, says, bring her out and have her burned to death. So there you go. So in his eyes, he was doing the righteous, moral thing by bringing out his daughter-in-law and having her burned to death because she'd had sex with somebody he didn't know, even though she'd already had sex with his other son, who he did know about. But apparently, because it was outside the family, it was viewed as prostitution, and she deserved to burn to death, and as well murdering the unborn baby inside her, burned to death. And apparently, this is a bit odd. What did her dad have to say about this? What did Tamar's dad say? Where was his input? Actually, no, Judah, you bastard, you're not burning my daughter to death. You're not burning my daughter to death just because you've lost 2 sons. You're not burning, she's my daughter. She wanted to have a child. I wanted to have a grandchild. You wouldn't present your youngest son to her as a new husband, and so she was getting on in years, and she had to find somebody else to have sex with. So sorry, Judah, I'm sorry, you're not taking my daughter to burn her to death, because me and the rest of my family, we're going to go to war about this because it's ridiculous. But no. Tamar's father is nowhere to be seen, even though she's living with him at this point. Nowhere to be seen. So apparently Judah has suddenly got the clout to say, bring out this woman. She's had sex with somebody other than my family members, and we're going to burn her to death. Lovely, 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 lovely. We're going to burn a woman to death for having sex even though her marriage is null and void because her real husband's died. What's she done wrong? Bizarre. But anyway, she deserves to get burned to death. And burned to death, it's not a nice way to go. Probably as bad as stoning, but there you go, burning to death, horrific. But anyway, he felt in his right. And at this point, of course, he hadn't been killed by Jehovah, the loving God of mercy, for having sex with her in the first place. So anyway, so as she was being brought out, obviously, they were saying bring her. Obviously brought out. She wasn't getting brought out of father's house. Obviously, his father's going, goodbye, Tamar, goodbye. So as she's getting brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I don't know if she did this, pigeon, no idea. I am pregnant by the man who owns these, she said, and she added, see if you recognise whose seal and cord and staff these are. So somehow, as she was getting brought out, she must have already got a message, big staff and the other things, and got it to somebody else and says, take them to my father-in-law, because he's the one who's commanded that I be put to death. Bizarre. So, of course, Judah gets the stuff back and goes, fuck me, that's my staff. And then the penny drops big style. So Judah recognized him and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Sheila, and he did not sleep with her again. So I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this one. She is more righteous than I. She is more righteous than I. Since I wouldn't give it. So in other words, he at that point finally, he's only now, because he's been faced with the fact that he's made her pregnant, regardless if he made her pregnant or not. That bit at the end, since I wouldn't give her to my son Sheila, that was the whole thing. He refused to do his duty as a father to present his third son to her, so she had no choice but to go to somebody else. And for some reason she chose Judah. Don't ask me why. Maybe she had a thing for older men. I don't know. I wanted to keep it in the family, as a lot of them did back then. So that was it. Happy days, happy days. She doesn't get burnt to death. Judah still doesn't get shown up for the complete despicable twat he was, and for some reason God doesn't put Judah to death either, despite the fact he'd done something worse than his own son. It's really odd. So we then crack on from that story, and it basically says she came time for a birth, she had twins, and that very odd one where one came out and she put a scarlet thread round his wrist, and then the other one came out, he drew his hand back, and it says here, it says, and he was named Perez. Then his brother, who the scarlet thread just came out, his name was Zerah. So Zerah sort of came out first, but then went back in because he wasn't ready to face the world yet. So Perez came out, and Perez is a direct descendant of Jesus Christ, who a lot of people who watch these videos still think is the Messiah, and who, you know, that who gave his life for us so that we may have everlasting life. It's funny because there's people dying every day, so I don't know where they're living everlastingly. It's certainly not down here. So what do we get from that then? It's a bit odd. So in other words, Jesus's line comes from the fact that a woman pretended to be a prostitute has sex with her father-in-law. Yes. I'm just going to do this a second because it's really hot again. I need a John McEnroe headband actually to soak up the sweat. So yes, so there's a program on the telly called "Who Do You Think You Are?" But you know, if it came back to now now we have Jesus, and who do you think you are? And he goes, "Oh my God, oh you're saying my great actually had sex with his own daughter-in-law, thinking she was a prostitute, and I came from that lineage." Yes, you did, Jesus. Oh. Well, there's a skeleton in the cupboard. There's a few skeletons in that cupboard, I can tell you. So anyway, yeah. So what do we get from that story? We get a lot of things in that story. I think yet again it just shows that women in the Bible, a lot of the women, you can't be bothered even naming them. A lot of them are quickly second-class citizens. They have to do this, they have to do that, burnt to death, and a lot of the men getting away with scot-free. We get Onan who decided to ejaculate over Tamar instead of her, and he gets put to death, even though he could have been a really decent guy and he was great into the community and didn't even love the woman and love somebody else. But that's because the God who is slow to anger, fast to mercy, and the God of love just decided to kill him because he was watching all the time. Shame he wasn't watching what was happening in the Garden of Eden. And yet there is another example in my mind of how another nail in the coffin, that is the God of the Bible, that yet again, and I've said this time and time again, when you look at the horrific story, the gods of the Romans, the gods of the Greeks, the gods of the Egyptians, and I could go on and on and on here, you look at the things they did and you think, oh my God, thank God, I shouldn't really say that really, but thank God those gods don't really exist, because they're really mean and horrible. Sorry, apparently this God is supposed to really exist, and honestly, when you look at what's written in the Old Testament, he really is mean and horrible. No wonder when his son came to the earth, he just thought, oh, I'm not going to make his mistakes, which is maybe why you get the contrast, but maybe I'll discuss that at a later date. It is a bit odd because I know I've put my videos onto Facebook things, relating to how I thought what happened with Job was ridiculous, and yet a lot of people are saying, oh no, how can you question God, because without God we didn't have this, without God. And it's really odd. So many people want to make excuses for the God of the Bible, and when you actually look at it seems as though the only thing they hold on to is, but he provided his son. Yeah, but what about all the thousands of others he killed? What about all the billions of people he alleges going to kill when Armageddon comes? But he just lets his one son. What about us? We're all supposed to be God's children. No problem us dying, but we're supposed to be really, really thankful that he allowed his son to come down earth to have a horrible death, which significantly other people have had worse deaths. Maybe, I'm sure it'd been far worse if Jesus had potentially Tamar's fate and been put to death. I'm absolutely positive burning to death is a far more horrible death than what Jesus went through. But anyway, that's all I have to say about this. And we are just starting, because there's so many other stories in the Bible that really reveals a lot about the Bible writers, their view on women, and also the God of the Bible. Anyway, have a horrible... I'm not having a horrible day. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and leave any comments if you like. If you can't, well, bye-bye.